of success. We have a strategic plan update by District Management Group, and I'll call on Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Boswell. We're going to welcome to the podium here in just a second the members of our DMG team helping us with our strategic plan. As the community is aware, we are amidst getting a new strategic plan update, building on our all versus all means all format and other strategic initiatives. The community has given us a lot of input over the years, and we look forward to listening and working with them as we build this strategic plan. The strategic plan does not just belong to the Board of Education or the school district. It belongs to the District of Lincoln and Lincoln Public Schools. And with that, would you please come and introduce your team? And then we'll be very attentive to your presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So wonderful to be here with you all. As you mentioned, my name is Joe Costello. I'm a director with the team at District Management Group. I'm also joined here by two of my colleagues, Mia Elliott and Talia Mercado. In terms of our time for today, we're very excited to share a brief update on the work that we've been engaged with you all, just to give you a little bit of the taste of the work that we've been doing and also where we're going from here. I'll also mention that we will have additional time for you all later in the summer where we will be able to dig into some of the nitty-gritty details with some of these materials. So in terms of our time for today, really three main objectives. Number one, discussing the upcoming phases of the strategic planning process and the role of the district steering committee, which is a combination of Board of Education members as well as district staff and leaders. We'll also share a brief preliminary high-level findings from the first phase of work, which is this landscape analysis of Lincoln Public Schools that is really critical in informing the development of the strategic plan. This will be a fairly high-level overview of those findings. We'll, again, have additional time later in the summer where we will be able to share in depth some more of those details. And then from there, we'll align on some of those next steps related to developing the strategic plan, talking more about the process for building on the extensive stakeholder engagement that has already happened within the Lincoln Public Schools, but then thinking about how we then build upon that really rich stakeholder engagement, draft some preliminary language for the mission, vision, theory of action, some of those core elements of the strategic plan, so that we can then re-engage the community and really put something in front of community members that does reflect all of the rich and extensive stakeholder engagement that has happened previously. Before we dive in, I just wanted to share with you all the 5 goals of the strategic planning process. These are goals that were shared previously and just undergird all of the work that we're doing within strategic planning. The first one is really the most important, right? The goal of this work is to develop an actionable strategy that helps your district navigate really tough trade-offs and guide decision-making to improve outcomes for students and stakeholders. The second, building support among stakeholders and building buy-in for the district's path forward by leveraging extensive community and stakeholder engagement, right? So again, building on the extensive stakeholder engagement that has already happened in this district over the last 5, 10 years and even beyond, but then using that to inform a draft version of that strategic plan that we can then expand on by re-engaging the community in really strategic and intentional ways. In so doing, that third goal, embedding the Lincoln Public Schools All Means All action plan and the superintendent search and transition process to again build on that extensive community engagement that was previously conducted by the district. And then this will allow us to really drive results. You know, once we have this strategic plan that comes together, it really is that actionable strategy that drives results with specific priorities and measurable goals that enables the district to track progress towards those identified outcomes. And then ultimately, that strategic plan will help you realign how your district allocates precious resources to support those key strategic objectives by creating a thoughtful, results-oriented strategy. In terms of how we're going to be doing that, the work is really divided into 3 phases in terms of our partnership with you all that sets you up for implementation of the strategic plan starting in February and moving beyond. The first phase of work that we are currently engaged in is this preliminary analysis. This consists of forming and convening the Strategic Planning Design Steering Committee, and in doing that, conducting a preliminary analysis of really the current state of affairs in the district. So gathering quantitative data, analyzing data and sharing findings from this preliminary analysis, speaking with a smaller group of district stakeholders, district and community stakeholders, administering and analyzing the results from the LPS perception survey. So we were able to comb through all of that data. And then also analyzing and incorporating current district data sets from the superintendent search and transition process, as well as studying that all means all action plan framework and making sure that that really is a critical part of the strategic planning process moving forward. From there, we are able to then convene the steering committee to start drafting that strategic planning language. So really focusing in on the district's mission and vision. So building on your existing mission and vision, because again, we know that you have expended extensive resources and time and energy into having these really robust planning documents. So want to build on that. And then codify a theory of action, really the core fundamental beliefs of if we do these things, then we can expect these outcomes. Which then allows us to codify those or develop those district priorities that are in line with your theory of action and really give you that direction that you need to focus on those 3 to 5 key areas moving forward. And then from there, once we develop that draft strategic plan, then we can re-engage the community so that we have really something for them to react to. Again, can't say this enough, your district, one of the strengths, we work with districts all across the country, one of your strengths is your community engagement, and we want to respect that community engagement in this process and really build on that community engagement so that folks can see that their voices have been seen and heard and have been incorporated into the strategic planning documentation. And so in doing so, we'll be able to conduct stakeholder focus groups, community meetings, interviews, surveys, all of these different formats and forums to gather that feedback on this initial draft of the strategic plan. We can then take all of that information back to develop the final version of that strategic plan. So analyzing stakeholder feedback and making necessary adjustments to the draft to make sure it really truly does represent the needs of the community. And then from there, that will allow us to identify those goals and measurable objectives based on stakeholder and staff feedback, and then present that final strategic plan back to you all so that you all can weigh in and make sure that your voices are heard and are a part of the finalization process. And again, all 3 of those phases will set you all up for the next phases of work, or the next phases of work in implementation, thinking about those initiatives, those key action steps that really bring that strategic plan to life and make it more than just a document. In terms of the timeline for this work, so work really does span from March all the way through February of 2024, March of 2023 through February 24. We are towards the end of this first phase of work conducting the preliminary analysis. We actually were able to meet with the steering committee today to share the first draft of that preliminary analysis. We had a really rich conversation about what some of the core needs of the district are. From there, we'll be able to incorporate feedback, update that preliminary analysis to make sure it really truly represents all of those key areas of need. And then that will really pull us into the second phase of work with the steering committee, developing and refining that district mission, vision, and then thinking about the theory of action, documenting some of those preliminary priority areas that we can then put in front of the community of Lincoln. And engage the community in really thoughtful, straightforward, or thoughtful, strategic ways to make sure that we're gathering feedback on all of these different aspects of the strategic plan, incorporating all of these priority areas of folks from all across the district, and doing so in a really representative way, recognizing that Lincoln is a rich, diverse community, and we need to make sure that all the different stakeholder voices have a space in the strategic planning process. And then with all of that wonderful stakeholder engagement, we'll be able to take that back, synthesize it, incorporate it into the final version of that strategic plan that we can then workshop with the steering committee so that we can then put it in front of you all so that you can engage with it and then finalize that strategic plan by February of 2024. Just so we're clear, when we talk about the steering committee, we have 11 wonderful members of the steering committee, inclusive of board members, district leadership, district staff, all of whom bring really wonderful perspectives and represent different corners of the community. And this has really led to some incredibly rich and powerful conversations about what the core needs of the district are, and then how we take those core needs and think about, okay, what should the larger strategy of the district be moving forward? I think what's so wonderful, too, is the extensive experience of all of these members and how every conversation that we have harkens back to previous rounds of stakeholder engagement that happened, right? I think there's some tremendous strategy in this district, and so excited to continue to incorporate that in these conversations and then think about, okay, moving forward, what should the next version of this strategy be that sets the district up for success. In terms of the roles and responsibilities of the steering committee, just to be clear here as well. So my team with District Management Group, and I have 2 other colleagues who are back in the Boston area who are not able to be here today, but they make up our full DM group team. Our core roles are providing guidance and materials for the steering committee, providing project management support, especially with all this stakeholder engagement, requires a lot of extensive project management, so just allows us to make sure we're maintaining all of these timelines and able to coordinate all of these various efforts. Then through all of these conversations, synthesizing information and all of the findings and learnings so that the steering committee has materials to react to. And then supporting with gathering the multiple rounds of key stakeholder feedback and incorporating that into the strategic plan. From the district steering committee side, there are 4 main roles and responsibilities. Number 1, being voices of the community, so to speak, providing those diverse experiences based on steering committee members' past experiences, where they're coming from in the community, providing that content expertise. I think both board members and district staff come with very specific backgrounds, and all of that expertise is really wonderful and really important in this strategic planning process. And then next piece, championing the effort of developing and implementing a long-term strategic plan. A strategic plan in some districts may end up being a sheet of paper, with really fancy language. In a district like Lincoln, I don't believe that will ever be the case. And I think what's so critical about the members of the steering committee is being the advocates of this kind of work to really make sure that it is as powerful as it possibly can be, and really does drive district strategy and district operations moving forward. And then finally, and last but not least, serving as that feedback loop for the community, making sure that we commit to these forums so that every stakeholder, every community member in Lincoln, Nebraska has the opportunity to weigh in on these really important topics and can be a part of the strategic planning process. For this next phase of work for developing the strategic plan, the 3 core areas that we're going to be focusing in on are the mission and vision, so setting that long-term district aspirations, the theory of action, right, that fundamental belief around what will lead to long-term success in the district, usually as like an if-then statement. If we do these things, then we will expect to see these outcomes. And then finally, some draft priorities and some draft measurable goals that correspond with those priority areas. Again, the first development of these portions of the strategic plan will be with the steering committee based on all of the extensive previous rounds of stakeholder feedback. And then from there, we'll be able to put the draft language in front of the community members of Lincoln to really weigh in on them and make sure that we're refining them based on updated community needs. To give you a little bit of a taste of the preliminary analysis, so this was some of the data analysis that we did that fed into our conversation for today. Again, as a side note, we'll be able to share a much more in-depth version of these findings given the time constraints today. We just wanted to give you a quick taste. Combined both qualitative evidence with interviews with various district stakeholders, as well as some data analysis starting with those key vehicles for stakeholder engagement. That all means all action plan, superintendent transition plan, and then all sorts of district-wide data just to make sure that we have a really clear understanding of the current state of affairs for the Lincoln Public Schools. And it's really the combination of these different forms of data that provide us the key findings for this preliminary analysis. In terms of the actual findings themselves, broke them into 4 large buckets. Number 1 being community demographics and enrollment trends. Thinking about how has the community of Lincoln changed over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years or so. Then thinking about district operations and staff well-being. How is the district really adapting in terms of how it is supporting this larger community? And then from there, thinking about, okay, what are the outcomes, right? What are the outcomes for students, both in terms of student outcomes, student academic outcomes, but also thinking about student well-being. How are we supporting all children all students across the district? And then finally, what is the community saying about this? What are families and communities saying about how the district is doing, and then this kind of ties us into the next phase of work, which will be how do we re-engage the community to make sure that the strategic plan, the vision for how this district should operate really does represent the needs of the community. So again, very high-level taste of some really in-depth findings that we'll be able to share with you at a later date. So in terms of our time today, where we're going from here, so we'll be able to incorporate the feedback from you all. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you and from the feedback from your colleagues from earlier today. And then we will be meeting with the steering committee to refine the district mission, vision, theory of action, those preliminary priority areas. Then we will also be scheduling a time to share a more in-depth review of these materials, as well as further updates on the development of the strategic plan. And then the next really massive portion to this engagement is that stakeholder re-engagement, right? So having those interviews, those focus groups, community meetings, surveys, really all these different platforms that really, so that we can reach a representative sampling of the community. Really everybody who wants to provide feedback in this process has a space to do that. So we'll be partnering with our various district folks to be able to set all of that up. And with that, that's just a quick update on where we stand with the strategic plan development process.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. And with that, I'll turn it back to Mr. Boswell.
Discussion? Bob?
Yeah, I'll just point out that we had actually it was over a 2-hour meeting because we had so many questions. We actually went over time. One of the things I like is the work that's being done to look at some better comparative data to districts more similar to Lincoln. We're kind of unique in Lincoln, so it's nice to have comparison to Des Moines and Greeley and Wichita and some other places. The one thing that came up a bit was our graduation data. We get called out a lot on that, but our data is not comparable because our graduation rate requirements are significantly higher than not just in Nebraska but other districts. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And we look forward to some more discussion on that. And I think our community members, I think the community needs to weigh in on that. There are pros and cons to that, and I think that'll be an interesting way to I think one of the things we'll probably frame and talk about. So,
Further discussion? All right. Joe and team, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item is public comment. Speakers have 3 minutes. I have 2 blue cards. Whoops, it's all right. And we will begin with Reverend William Jackson.